Well, this captain is a little better at docking his boat than I am. Welcome to New London this afternoon and to another drive-by devotional. I'm down by the train station in New London. It's also the location for our ferries. This is the Cross Sound Ferry, the Jennifer B coming in. We also have the Fishers Island Ferry, the Block Island Ferry, the high-speed ferry that you can see over to my left. Our family usually goes up to Point Judith in Rhode Island to take that ferry when we want to go to Block Island, Rhode Island. There are more trips per day. It's cheaper and it's faster. But you can come from New London and not bother driving up 95, which has its advantages. We're also right behind the New London train station, Union Station, here in New London. A well-known architectural piece that was restored back in the 80s, saved from being destroyed. And we're very proud of it. Of course, from the back it doesn't look as good, but neither do I. And over here is the Fishers Island Ferry. You can see it coming in. It's a busy time. People are coming to the end of their shift, coming home. It's not as busy as it used to be. There's less traffic because of the reduction in service because of all the shutdowns with the coronavirus. Our grandson Thomas loves trains, and so he likes to come down here to Union Station and watch the trains come in. As a matter of fact, one time my wife Andrea brought him down here. Her nickname is Mimi. She took the train schedule and let him watch a train come in New London, and then they hopped in the car and ran up 95 to see the same train go through Mystic. I call that peak Mimi. You don't get any more grandma than that, than stuffing a toddler in the back of a car seat and racing the train to the next station. We are halfway between Boston and New York. We're the only stop between Boston and New York for the Acela high-speed rail. The only place that it stops between Boston and New York is here and in New London. Of course, we're not that excited about having New Yorkers coming up right now. First of all, a lot of them are Yankee fans. And in the second case, they have a very high incidence of coronavirus right now. New London is a city where God brings the world. He does it through the rail station here. He does it through the ferry services. He does it through our schools. A lot of people don't think of us as a college town, but we actually have 3 colleges in New London. If I can zoom in, you'll see the Coast Guard Training Bark Eagle. The Coast Guard Training Bark Eagle. I'm sorry, I got a pop-up on my phone for I don't know why. But they're down there at the Coast Guard Station. They're normally home ported further upriver with the Coast Guard Academy just north of the Gold Star Bridge up here. Besides the Coast Guard Academy, we have Connecticut College. Our oldest daughter graduated from there, and Mitchell College. So we are a college town. Another thing that brings the world here is the military. Across the way and up the river is the submarine base in Groton, which is still called Sub Base New London, which doesn't seem fair to Groton. Right up the river was also where the USS Fulton used to be docked. That was a submarine tending ship. And Fulton Park in New London is named after that ship, even though the ship isn't here anymore. I've told you that we have a habit in New London of naming things by what they used to be, not what they are. So besides that, we also have Electric Boat and others that bring people here from all over the world. It's topography, it's the lay of the land that very often makes a city like this. We have a deep water port here, and I've already mentioned that anytime you're where a river meets the ocean, you're very often at a place where history has been made. West Point is on the Hudson River because it was such a vital waterway that they knew that they needed to build a military installation there that later became the Academy for the Army. The Connecticut River, a little bit further to our west, goes all the way up into Vermont and New Hampshire. It's the border between Vermont and New Hampshire for most of that run. And then it turns into New Hampshire, goes all the way up. Welcome home. It goes all the way up to what's called Third Lake in New Hampshire near the Canadian border. I have no idea why it's called Third Lake. Of course, here in New London, we have the Thames River. You can only go about 10 miles up before you hit Norwich, and there it spreads into 3 different rivers that are not navigable by large vessels. And it's only open that far because of dredging. Partway up, there's a place called Trading Cove. It's called that because before the river was dredged, I suppose, is where you could turn in and trade with local Native American tribes. So we're halfway between New York and Boston, and that makes us an attractive place. Not always for the right reasons. When you're in a place like this, it's also a place where the rum runners would come during the days of Prohibition. Further down the shore, there's the Lighthouse Inn, and the Lighthouse Inn, back in the day, there was a tunnel from the bar to the waterfront where the people during the days of Prohibition would smuggle the whiskey and the other drinks in. Even today, there's a lot of drug traffic up and down the I-95 corridor, and on the Amtrak station they have their own police force that's a part of the Amtrak rail line, and I've heard that we have quite a bit of human trafficking in the region as well. So the same things that make a city popular, the same things that make an area strategic, that make a region important, can also make it dangerous and conflicted. Israel was on a path between superpowers there on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean, and the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, all marched through there on their way to greater things. Paul and Barnabas and a missionary companion named John Mark landed in Pamphylia in the book of Acts. You look at the map and you can see that Pamphylia didn't have a port, but it was the only place along the shoreline that wasn't full of cliffs. And so there is a place there that's the only place in miles where there's a sandy shoreline and there's a beach and there's a place for vessels to come in. And so the other thing that happened there in Pamphylia was that was where John Mark, their young companion, turned back. That's where he decided that he was going to go home and back to his homeland there in Israel. The details of John Mark turning back are not given. As a matter of fact, Luke only gives us one verse, and it's only later that we learn how divisive it was for Paul and Barnabas. We have to be careful not to read too much into it. It's hard to know what happened or why he did it, and we always have to be careful when we assign motives. John Mark likely came from a wealthy family. The Bible tells us that the earliest group of disciples met in his mother's home. And you remember when Peter was miraculously released, or the angel set him free from prison, he went to the home of John Mark's mother, and the other disciples were there praying. And there was a servant girl, Rhoda, who wouldn't open the door because she couldn't understand that Peter was actually outside knocking to come in. They didn't believe her when she said that Peter was outside. A servant girl, Rhoda. So John Mark's family had at least one servant. So he came from what we might call a privileged life today, a wealthy life. Before they arrived in Pamphylia, they had just confronted demonic forces in Salamis. And for some reason, in Pamphylia, he decided that the missionary life was not for him. And for whatever reason, Paul was tremendously unhappy with that decision. And that gives us some insights as well. We don't know what the reason was, but Paul was a witness. And for him, he could say that after that, he didn't want to have him serve again the next time that he and Barnabas were going to go out. But Barnabas took John Mark, and Barnabas continued to disciple him. You know, there's a difference between not ready now and not ready yet. And Barnabas invested himself in the life of John Mark, and there's evidence that John Mark was later reconciled with the Apostle Paul, and the Apostle Paul asked for his help by name from prison. So it doesn't matter whether you're on the waterfront or whether you're further inland, whether you're in a big city, a small town, or a ghost town, especially today and in so many ways, whatever you've done, it's not over. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. And that purpose may be in New London. I hope you'll pray about it. And by the way, just like Pamphylia, we have a really nice beach. Come see us.